My brother Bill is from Mars. Actually, we're all from Mars around here. We keep our spaceship out back.
Hello and welcome to episode 385 of the Mark and Me podcast. As always, I'm your host Mark. Now joining me on today's episode is a very special guest. In my top 10 films of all time, easily The Hitcher makes that list. This film for me is an absolute masterpiece. I think Rutger Hauer's performance is one of the greatest that you'll ever see. The story's amazing. The directing is just absolute genius, so I'm absolutely thrilled that today I'm actually joined by the director himself, Robert Harmon. This is a great chat, it gets nice and deep and we talk all about The Hitcher, and the good news is if you're a huge fan of this film like me, one of the best companies out there, Second Sight, have just released a 4K and Blu-ray edition of this absolute incredible classic. But as always, you know what Second Sight are like. They put their heart and soul into these releases. The incredible limited edition set is easily my release of the year, and it's going to take something very special to beat it. And that interview with Robert is coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. But I always like to use the intro for each and every episode of Mark and Me, just to touch base and talk about my last episode. It was only 2 days ago, and I was joined by Mike Cunniff from the awesome band Boston Manor. This episode did so well, and I want to say a massive thanks to Mike and Boston Manor for sharing it, because I saw a hell of a lot of new listeners jump on board, so many new followers because of this, so it really does go a long way, so thanks so much. But today we need to talk about The Hitcher, and who else better to talk to than the man himself, Robert Harmon. So here we are, talking all things film. Robert, thank you for joining me today on the Mark and Me podcast.
You're so welcome. I appreciate the interest and looking forward to talking to you.
Lovely. The podcast has been going almost 7 years now, and I've done 376 different interviews.
Wow.
But each person gets the same first question. And what I'm really intrigued by is when you were a kid, we're going down nostalgia lane right now, what was that first film that maybe you watched with your parents or a friend gave you on VHS? Or what was that first film you maybe saw at the cinema that made you fall in love with film?
That is a really good question, and I can't remember anyone ever asking it. By the way, I'm not sure I know the answer, but I have something that popped into my head, so it's probably of some significance. It is a film I saw with my parents, and I was quite young. It's a very old movie, Ben-Hur, the
Oh,
Charlton
wow.
Heston. And I don't know, I think I could easily I'd never seen anything like it. And obviously that film has a lot of remarkable aspects to it. But I will also add at a much later age, when I was much older, and pretty much already knew I've always said I really wanted to be a film director before I knew what it was. From a very early age, I just knew that. How can I put this? I'm not a religious person at all, but to me, in a theater, it has the same. When the lights go down and the curtain opens up, revealing hopefully a nice 235 anamorphic screen, it's something. It's sort of religious to me. It's kind of it has a ritualistic quality.
I agree totally. I always say that the cinema for me is my church because we all gather together,
Yeah.
we're all seated together, and we're all there for the same reason. And for me, it's a chance to have escapism, so I can go there and switch off and not worry about any debt issues or what's going on in the world. I can just go there and be grateful and entertained and taken to a whole different world for 2 or 3 hours. And that is something that is so unique but so special.
I agree. I would even add that in addition to all the escapism aspects you talked about, as the curtain opens, I also experience a kind of a strong sense of hope that it's going to be good, whatever it is I'm about to see. So
No
most
pressure on the films that aren't very good. When you go there and it's 2 hours, you're like, Oh, I wish I could get those 2 hours of my life back, but most of the
Like,
time I'm
or in the
quite good
case
at
of
picking the
some,
right ones.
editorialize for a second at the risk of angering certain people, but I won't mention any names, except except for modern day. Now there are a whole bunch of 3 hour movies that
Yeah.
wonder what that's about. But I will also say that the other thing I was always of interest to me, even as a kid, was architecture. I've
Okay.
always loved, and I became a photographer at a very early age, made a living at that for some decades before I had anything to do with movies. Um, and then when it came time, anyway, long story short, I was actually in the middle of applying to architecture schools, having come to the conclusion that this film directing thing, it's so unlikely to happen. I don't want, so I sent in some of my applications and then went to this movie in New York that I heard something about with a couple of friends called 2001.
Oh, wow.
And that was 1968. And it's now 2024, and I'm still not recovered.
No. I do another podcast actually where I review films, and we've just recently revisited that film, and I still, to 2001 Space Odyssey, I still to this day cannot get my head around how they did that. I don't know how they did it.
Uh, to me, it's by orders of magnitude the best film ever made,
Yeah. It's
most unique film ever made, but certainly through mainstream Hollywood.
so what I normally ask at this point, you've started to kind of dip into it already, is you then decided you wanted to be a film director and
Plus of
you know,
2001.
yeah, and I wondered if you turn around to your parents and you say, "Mom, Dad, I want to make films for a living," are they taking you seriously at this point in your life? Are they like, "Get a real job, son," or are they like, "We're gonna back you to the moon"?
Well, I don't know they ever said they would back me. They didn't have the money to back me. I
No.
asked them to. Uh, no, they were very supportive. I had very unusual and really great parents. Um, Uh, the only thing that it's slightly funny because of course they really never knew anything about the details of the jobs involved in filmmaking. But they did say, but don't you think you should be an assistant director first? And that was just a lack of understanding, only based on the name of the job, not realizing that assistant directors, if they leave that work, they usually become producers. Very few assistant directors become directors. Certainly it's happened, but not very
Yeah.
often. It's not a pathway to directing, it's a pathway to producing.
So obviously we're going back now, 1983, your debut was China Lake, which was a short, but it was your first major piece of work you put out there for the world to see. And I wondered, what was your kind of vision of that? Was it that you just wanted to try and make a name for yourself, just to try and get something out there so people start taking you seriously? Or was it just, looking back now, just, I suppose we're looking nearly 40 years ago, was it just a case of, I want to just put something out there. I just want to make something.
No, it was more specific than that, and you've already alluded to it. No, it was conceived and designed and executed as much as it could be as a calling card, as a directorial calling card.
Yeah,
Couldn't ask anybody to hire me to direct something if I couldn't, when I moved to Hollywood, which I did in 78, believe it or not, that's how long I've been here. Uh, since I had skills and experience as a photographer, I became a set still, we used to call him still man. I was
yeah,
on the set every day taking still photographs that they would be using in publicity. And the idea was make a little money. I was also doing architectural photography on the side that really paid the bills because the clients were big architects and rich banks and all that stuff. But I wanted to get close to filmmaking so I could learn about things. So um, um, and I came to the understanding that there were two pathways to becoming a director. One was start writing,
yeah,
and I had no idea whether I could or how that would go. And write really great screenplays and have some of them produced and turned into movies. And then finally, I would be able to say, as certain people have been able to do, okay, you want to buy this one? But this time I have to go. I come with it to direct it. And the other pathway was to make a short film. I knew a lot of people in the American Film Institute, which here in LA.
yeah,
I was watching them. Um, One particular person I knew slightly, and I made a determination because I saw a short film that he made at AFI, and I thought, this is good. This is a good movie. And if he doesn't get work, because then I started thinking I should make a short film. I didn't have any confidence in the writing thing, and I didn't want to wait 10 years.
No.
It could easily take that long. And I knew people that made short films, and suddenly there, and that was that, and it worked. Um, so I watched his career as he left AFI with this short, and he got work immediately. And I've since met him, and a guy named Michael Dinner. He's done a lot of very nice film projects and television projects. And I said, Michael, I owe you my career. I don't even know you, but I watched that movie of yours, and you were the guinea pig. And if you hadn't gotten a job, I don't know what I would have done. So that's why I did it. And it just worked so spectacular. It was very, very well planned. And the whole idea of China Lake was make this look like 30 minutes of a really good full-length film. It was shot in anamorphic, which remains to this day my favorite format, 2:3:5. And not just the aspect ratio, but all the, how can I put it, sort of the optical flaws. They really are flaws, but the
Yeah.
optical eccentricities of the anamorphic format, the way specular highlights like car headlights go across the screen with that blue line, and the inherent lack of depth of field because you have to use much longer lenses, on and on and on. There's something about it that I find it's great. So shot China Lake with borrowed anamorphic Panaflexes from Panavision, which was pretty great. There
I
was
love all
a
this, and I find it fascinating, especially you were talking about the lights and the way that you kind of get the lens flare and everything else, and all this kind of visual, and I think it blows my mind. And I suppose what was it? I know we're here especially today to focus. Mainly, I love talking about filmmaking in general, but The Hitcher is the main reason that we're talking today. But to come off the back of China Lake only 2 years later, for you to sit there then and bring us this absolute, and I mean this completely, and I'd say this if you weren't here, absolute masterpiece. One of my
oh,
favorite films ever made, The Hitcher, and I still think you must pinch yourself knowing that was your second ever release. Like it's insane.
well, first release, China Lake, there really wasn't any release. It was just a film
Well,
that I made.
yeah,
Go
work
to
of yeah.
executives. It wasn't even I don't think you'd even call it professional. Obviously, nobody paid me. I spent every cent I had on it for a long time. An interesting statistic about China Lake, shot in 11 days in post-production for 2 years.
Wow.
And the reason for that only was I knew enough, green as I was, I knew enough to know that this is the last time, if I even lucky enough to have a career, in which time will mean nothing because I'm not paying anybody. So the editor of China Lake was a good friend of mine. He was an assistant editor at the time. By the way, went on to win the Academy Award for The Matrix. So it was very obvious that he was a terrific editor even then. A guy named Zach Steinberg. Um, and so Zach had a lot of contacts in the high end, big time movie making world because he was an assistant editor. And so we would cut China Lake off hours at night
Yeah.
in the cutting rooms that he was an assistant on, literally without telling anybody. We used to have to sneak onto what used to be the Columbia lot. It was even before, I think even before Sony bought it, but the Culver City lot, or MGM actually, whatever it was at the time. Sneak on a lot and go into the cutting room that Zach was in during the day and cut at night. And another slightly funny, very short story. I ended up cutting a TV pilot that I once did years ago with that editor, the guy who room we snuck into every night. And I told him, and he said, "Wow, I always thought there was that. I knew I didn't leave that. This was in the days of film, so I thought the splicer was in a funny place, and what I didn't know how the tape dispenser get over there. Well, it was us.
What a
But that
unique
happened,
story. This is
and
crazy.
then that movie would end, and we weren't done with cutting China Lake, so then we'd have to wait again to go to another cutting room somewhere else. So that's why it took so long. The sound editors were super high-end sound editors. But then they'd have the bad taste to go get a job. And so we have to shut down for 3, 4 months and do nothing and wait for him. Um, the mixers, the dubbing crew of the final mix of China Lake is exactly the same crew. And this is crazy, but true. Exactly the same crew that did Star Wars.
That is insane.
Insane.
Yeah.
Exactly right. But as I said, I was just determined that it be just like a high budget Hollywood movie, but only 30 minutes long. And that's how we did it by getting these great people that knew way more than I did about everything.
It's such a unique story. Like I've done so many interviews with directors and actors, but no one's kind of gone about it this way. Your story is very unique. It blows my mind, to be honest, that you're sneaking in and trying to do this editing and all this without people knowing, and it just
Yeah.
showed your determination and what you do and how far you'd go just to make sure it got done.
Well, how far I would go, I guess, to make sure that it was as good as it could be because I wanted it to really badly wanted it to work for me.
Yeah,
It's designed to do, and it did. I got a super powerful agent in about a week. Even then, I knew, wow, that's crazy. Anyway, yeah, sorry. Off on
we should talk the Hitcher. That was your second piece of work. Not let's not say release. Let's say that was the next project you worked on, and genuinely one of the greatest films ever made. And I just wondered if it felt real at the time from being on set, making this absolute masterpiece that just everything about it works. And the year's 1986, and I'm just thinking to myself, what's it like in your head? What's it like being on set and making this film with probably, I don't know, was there any kind of expectations, or were you just making this film that was for you at that time?
Well, if I understand your question, well, it was full of emotion of what
Yeah,
various kinds. One thing was, for various reasons, mostly casting, but not completely. From the time I was hired with a
yeah,
contract, it was not bullshit. I was hired until the time we actually started to shoot the movie was almost a year. So it gave me a long time to sort of get used to the idea that I was going to make this movie. And it also gave me a very long prep period, which was fantastic because they were willing to finance location scouting. So I scouted for a really long time. Never had that luxury again. I mean, months and months and months out in the desert with a line producer. And well, anyway, um, but the making of the movie was certainly fraught with all the problems of movie making, which I had a little experience with having made China Lake. So I knew I knew it's not as easy as it looks.
no.
Things always crop up, and it was it was it was an intense version of on Monday, and I mean this, of course, only figuratively speaking. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I was thinking, this is unbelievable that I'm here doing this, and Rutger's fantastic, and on and on. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I never want to do this again as long as I live. I'm
Yeah.
getting this. This is horrific. I can't even begin to tell you. Um, But then I learned that that's the way it is. You have to expect that. That's why when friends of mine who were going to direct their first movie, they would come to me and say, "What advice can you give me?" My advice is always, no matter how much you think you're going to know what it feels like, you will not know. You cannot imagine it until you're there. And then they come back and they say, I said, how'd it go? And they say, the ones that say, oh, it was really fun. I had a great time. I don't say it, but I think to myself, well, you did it wrong. You
Yeah.
must have. Anyway, well, no, it was, I can still remember standing in the bathroom of a hotel in Barstow, California, which is where we started shooting, desert community, not too far from Los Angeles, and spending, oh, I'd say a full minute, maybe 2 minutes with myself in the mirror of that motel bathroom, trying to say whatever, can I don't know how, we have a language problem, or can I say what came to mind?
You can say whatever you want. You can say it was the fucking worst day of your life.
No, I said to myself, don't fuck it up.
Yeah.
Deal with myself to never give up and never stop trying to make it as good as I could. So I don't know if I answered your question
No, you
because
did. I still to this day, like we talked about 2001, I just can't imagine what the emotions were like, or when you're standing there directing Rutger and his performance alone is Oscar worthy. I've never seen kind of a villain or a harrowing portrayal, and I just wonder what it was like directing him. It blows my mind.
he was, I was nervous because he was Rutger Hauer and I was nobody. He loved China Lake, which is why he did it. So that was a helpful thing to me. I'm sure there was
Yep.
a certain amount of respect that I might not have that I might have had to earn from Ground Zero, which I had already partially earned because he really liked that film. And he was delightful. It took me a little while to not be intimidated or um, just because our balance of experience was so out of whack. But I'll share another story. It's very short. Early on, we shot the scene where Tommy is in the roadside diner,
Yep.
and Rutger comes in, puts the pennies on his eyes and all that stuff. And they have the thing under the table with neither of them with Tommy's empty
Yeah.
gun and all that stuff. And I didn't feel like I was quite getting what I hoped it would be. And it never occurred to me to put it this way, but I said, I always direct directly with the actors. I don't yell stuff out across the room unless it's whatever. Anyway, and I remember saying to him, you know what? Just play this like he's your son, your beloved son. And I was very green, but I recognized a light bulb going off over Rutger's head. And this was something that he later told me was the key to the entire part. And I felt very gratified because he said, yes, okay. And then he played the scene that you see in the movie.
Yeah.
And it really was a good piece of direction. And from then on, there were no doubts. We had no doubts about each other, I think. It was just a lucky break on my part that I happened to have thought of something that was very helpful.
Are you able, even though you're so incorporated in it and you're the director and it's your film, are you able to take a step back and see just how much that film meant to people, especially with the second sight release now and the excitement and the buzz and everybody getting so excited about the 4K release? Do you realize just how much of an impact that had on the industry?
No, I would
No.
have to say. On the industry?
Honestly, everyone
What?
I go to Fright Fest, I go to horror cons, I speak to a number of directors, and the amount of people that talk about that film and what it meant to them and how it made them want to pick up a camera or make a film, you
I've
know,
heard a lot of, it'll sound like I'm, really ennobling myself beyond what I could possibly deserve. But over the years, I've had certain things happen
yeah,
that really blew me away. I was on the set of The Game, the David Fincher film.
yeah,
And I am one of the people, and I'm not alone. I think Seven is one of the great films I've ever made.
it's a masterpiece, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so we met for the first time while he's busy directing The Game, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Your movie changed my life." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "When I first saw that, and that made me realize that you could make a movie like that within the Hollywood system, and it completely changed my life." And that's one of the reasons I'm standing here today directing this movie. So hearing that, and I know Chris Nolan has always said it's been sort of uh, a favorite. What do they call it? Guilty pleasure, I
Yeah.
think. Um, so yeah, I've heard this over the years, and it's in Tarantino's book. I couldn't believe that. Somebody recently pointed out that it's four films from the '80s that he thinks are sort of worthy of respect and admiration. These are, fantastic filmmakers. So,
It doesn't
oh,
get
and
much
then the
better than
last
that,
one.
does it?
Well, I also did a film once, and the AD that I had, a really, really incredible guy named Brian Cook, who had done a bunch of Kubrick movies. And he told me that one day on The Shining, I guess it was The Shining, Kubrick showed up with a VHS tape of The Hitcher and said, "You guys should see this. It's terrific." And that, of course, because my feeling about 2001 and his other movies, that made not my day, that made my life.
Yeah. That's amazing. That beats any Oscar or any award.
Well, maybe, yeah. Oh, yeah, I don't really fully understand it. I really don't know that I do. But my theories about why it's has this kind of longevity. But those levels of things are, I don't really don't get it. But I'm happy about it. I don't,
I've never seen excitement like it online, especially Twitter and Instagram, about people so excited for the second site release. They kept teasing stuff and saying, it's coming and we're just about to
yeah.
finish the
Well,
restoration, and
I've seen it, of
everyone's
course. having worked on it, the second sight release is
Yeah.
extremely good.
I want it now, but I've got to wait about a month. I'm like, give it to me now, hook it to my veins. But I can't wait, and I'm
Well, I hope it doesn't disappoint you. You're obviously a uh, very knowledgeable and serious about all this, which is really great. Uh, it's pretty wonderful to talk to a guy your age about a scene in a movie made 40 years ago, and you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm
Kind of like
42, so it's
well said. Yeah.
yeah. My final question for you today, and I asked this to everybody that's been on. I've had Anthony Hopkins, Mads Mikkelsen, Kevin Smith, all the different people in the world. I've had so many different conversations, but like the start, I always ask the last question, and it's a bit different, to be honest. I am going to
So,
put you on. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
so was the first one.
Well, the
Was it?
first one was obviously how to get into the industry and what was your first film, but the ending one is very different. And what I like to do is to make the episodes as original as I can. I ask who it is, if it's an actor or director, the guest themselves, to choose a song that means something to them. So then, when this episode is all edited and ready for the world to listen to, I will go out there and then it'll play. And at the very end, your song that you choose is
Wow,
played after the interview. And that makes every single interview that I've done original.
that's fantastic.
It's
And
brilliant.
not an easy question.
I ask people that write songs as they're living. I've asked people that have been in very famous, successful bands, and they get
Yeah.
it down to 100, and then they're trying to get it down to 10, and then they'll email me a week later and say, "Actually, I changed my mind." But I don't do that. I like to go with what comes to your heart and soul in the moment that we're sharing right now.
Wow. When you say song, can it be a piece of music that
It can be a score from a film. It can be a piece of music. Someone once picked a 22-minute track, which I thought was a bit too much. But if people want to choose a certain song or a film score or a piece of music, then that's the one that should be there.
hmm,
It's not easy.
no, it isn't. And I'm all over the place, and I won't spend too much time on it because I know I probably have to move on, I guess. I don't know what the timing is. Um, and my worry is that one of the things that's come to mind is the classical piece. It's not very long, but and I'm not sure I have the right number, but there's a thing called it's classical, Four Last Songs by Strauss.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it's the fourth of the four of the four last songs.
I will find it. People have picked a Yoko Ono B-side that was only released on a certain vinyl for a certain year with a magazine, and I found it. So trust me, I will find that piece, and it'll be the last one we have on today's episode.
It's what the it was in the year of Living Dangerously, the Peter Weir movie.
Oh, right. Okay.
Very much for your enthusiasm and interest.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
So there it is. There's my interview with me and Robert. What a lovely guy. So kind with his time, so interesting, and I think he really appreciated the interview. He was very kind towards me, said some lovely words at the end, and I really hope one day we can get him back on the podcast for even longer. As I said at the start of today's episode, if you're a fan of the Hitcher, go and invest in the incredible Second Sight edition. You will not be let down. It's absolutely stunning. And if you go onto my Twitter this week, I am going to be giving a copy away, and it's really simple. You just have to retweet, and that's at @MarkandMePod. Give me a follow, and there's going to be loads of competitions, and it's always the best way to find out all about my new guests, new episodes, and whatever's coming to Mark and Me. If you've enjoyed today's episode, as always, this podcast will always remain free, but what I do ask is that you just share it. So as you're listening right now, open up your Facebook and post it, open up Twitter and hit that retweet button, or go on Instagram and put it as part of your stories. It is the best way to get the word spread, all about Mark and Me, and costs you absolutely nothing to do, but really does go a hell of a long way, and it really does bring a whole new listenership and audience to Mark and Me. I do also have a Patreon account. I am going to be launching this month, without fail, the Lost Tapes, which are exclusive episodes just for people that support me on there. There'll be interviews that no one else can hear, only to people that come via Patreon, and I can't wait to show you the guests that I've got lined up, launching in the next couple of weeks. And finally, let's give a shout out to the sponsor of the podcast, Richer Sounds. Without those guys, I couldn't keep this podcast going. So if you're in the market to go and watch the Hitcher on a brand new TV or a projector, why not go on richersounds.com or visit any of those stores, because they really are the best out there. And you know the score by now. It will only be a couple of days until I bring you another episode of the Mark and Me podcast. So until then, look after yourself, Go and watch The Hitcher, and I'll speak to you all very soon.